Hey, Just Thinking family, Virgil here. Want to take a moment just to clue you in on some of the incredible resources from Pastor Joel Webben of Right Response Ministries. Now, Right Response Ministries has made it their goal to resource the body of Christ as a supplement, of course, to the local church. They do so with sermons, with podcasts, with blog articles, and much, much more. Their mission is simple: to resource followers of Jesus so that they can confidently engage the culture rather than shrinking back under the fear of man. Right Response Ministries is committed to seeing Christians no longer as merely appeasing the culture, but engaging the culture in a valiant way, for sure. As Christians, we no longer can afford to simply sit back and attempt to conserve our biblical values. It's time for Christians to mount up with the true gospel courage and fight to win the culture to Christ. Now, to learn more about this great ministry, I want you to head over to justthinking.me/RRM. And that is RRM for Right Response Ministries. Let's get equipped and get to work changing the culture for the glory of God and for the good of his people.
Welcome to the Just Thinking Podcast with hosts Darrell Harrison and Virgil Walker, bringing you cultural apologetics as well as social issues from a biblical worldview. This is the Just Thinking Podcast. Let's think.
We're back. It's another edition of the Just Thinking Podcast. I am Virgil Walker.
And I am Darrell Harrison. What's going on, Omaha?
Man, bruh.
Man, I'm feeling hype, bro. I just woke up from another Black Power, slavery reparations, social injustice nap. And I'm feeling pretty crunk right about now, bro. I'm feeling pretty ready.
Are you feeling
How about
good,
you, man?
man?
I'm feeling good, man.
I feel all right, man. I didn't, well, you know what I did after church was over, I guess, you know how about 2 or 3 o'clock when you lay it down, after service is over, you get home and you kind of lay it down. I laid it down and I thought, you know what, this could serve as my Black Power slavery reparations power nap, man. That's kind of what I thought, man. It reminded me of the last conversation we had. I thought I need to start taking these, man. I got a lot of sleep to catch up on.
Hold on, bro. See, you can't really count it as a Black Power slavery reparations nap. Did you sweat while you were asleep? Were you
I did not sweat while I was
see. You were uncomfortable. That can't be a Black Power slavery reparations nap, bro. Because there was no suffrage involved with that. If you were too comfortable, that can't be.
So you mean to tell me there's a category where I have to be laid out and uncomfortable during the sleep?
Yes,
is that how that works?
Because listen, slavery was uncomfortable, wasn't it? So why what right do you have to be comfortable? What right do you have to be comfortable then when you take your Black Power slavery reparations nap? You gotta come on, bro. You gotta connect with the past, man.
Okay. That's why. Listen. That's why I'm with you, man. I'm still learning. I got to learn how these things work so I can put it all together, man. So
just
I appreciate you, Doc.
Just stick with me, bro.
No doubt.
I'll take you to the promised land, Virg. Just stick with me, bro.
I know you will, man. That's why I'm gonna stick with you, bro.
Man, for better or worse.
No doubt.
Man,
no doubt,
tell our listeners, man. This is a special episode we're recording here this afternoon, man. Why don't you tell our listeners what's up?
Well, I'm incredibly excited about this special episode, man. You and I have been together, I guess a little over 2 years. I know I've counted the 2-year mark.
Yeah, a little over 2 years.
Equally important, man, if not more so, man. We have recorded 100 episodes of the Just Thinking podcast together, man. And I'm blown away by that. I can't believe it. I could not have thought about this journey, man, and where we've come from and what we've done and what we've been able to accomplish during this time together. So, man, I'm blown away by that. And I know that you and I both wanted to kind of take a minute and just create a special episode, one, to just thank our listeners, man, and all the the time that they've spent with us, the journey they've been on with us, all the subject matter we've covered, the ground we've laid, and folks who've been with us from the beginning all the way to the point where maybe they just heard about us after the George Floyd episode, or maybe they just heard about us during the Blessed Assurance episode, and just coming on recently. So we just want to take a minute, man, and just kind of pause and just really kind of express our gratitude for all of those who've joined with Just Thinking up to this point.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Virgil. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, we've in about 2.5 years, I think, give or take, we just released the episode that we just released on, excuse me, biblical exposition of white culture was officially episode number 100. So when this episode drops, it'll be episode number 101. But we thought it'd be really cool to give our listeners, and as you said, Virg, as just sort of a gesture of our appreciation and thanks to them for hanging in there with us over 100 episodes, kind of give them this sort of surprise episode. We haven't promoted this episode. We haven't mentioned this episode really on social media or out of any sort of public venue at all. So when this episode drops in a couple of days, it's going to be a surprise to our listeners and our subscribers, and I'm looking forward to their reaction to it. This is we were saying earlier off the air that this is the most freestyle episode that we've done, right. And it feels really good, man. This is the first episode that I can recall getting behind the mic with you on where I really didn't have to do any prep work. And
right.
And you know what's involved in our prep work. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But you know what's involved in us preparing to do an episode. But yeah, 100 episodes. We're going to be talking about a little bit about the history of the podcast, how it came together, how you and I got brought together. We're going to be talking about that a little bit as we move on here. But what I want to do first of all, man, is let our listeners know that as part of this celebratory episode where we're sort of got two objectives here. Number one, we just want to celebrate that we've got, by God's grace, 100 episodes under our belt. That's unbelievable. And then number two, though, we do want to make our listeners and our donors a part of this. We want to make them a part of this. So that's a dual objective there. But for our listeners, we thought it'd be really cool to have other members of the JT podcast team on with us for this episode.
Right. Right.
These are the folks who are behind us, behind the scenes, right? So
absolutely,
we've heard of people working behind the scenes before, but I don't want to just leave it at the fact that they work behind the scenes. These are folks who work behind us, behind the scenes. Okay, so we want to tirelessly and for free.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that.
Hey, I think we should double their current paychecks, man. We should double their current paycheck.
You mean by adding a zero?
Right, add another zero onto it, man.
Yeah, none of us are compensated. We do this out of love for the Lord, love for one another, love for our listeners, just love for the Word of God. I mean, I could go on and on and on. But yeah, right. So we thought it'd be really cool, man, to bring on behind the mic with us today the rest of our core team. These are folks who are behind the scenes. They're behind us. They support us tirelessly. And I'm serious when I say that. They support us tirelessly to help you and I, Virgil, deliver the quality content that we strive to deliver with every single episode that we produce. Absolutely. So what we want to do is take a few minutes and let them introduce themselves. And let's go ahead and introduce Charles Simpson Jr. to our listeners. Charles, you want to go ahead, man? Did I get that suffix correct, or did I get that wrong?
You got a little wrong, but it's okay. Charles Simpson Sr., but close enough.
Senior. Go ahead, Charles.
Yes. So I'm Charles Simpson Sr. I'm kind of the digital marketing manager for the Just Thinking podcast and the Just Thinking brand.
He sounds so smooth, man. Darrell, you hearing this, brother? He sounds so smooth on the microphone.
He sounds like he's auditioning.
Charles Simpson.
He sounds like he's auditioning for a midnight gig on Jazz FM radio.
Right. You remember the late night jazz shows, man, where they have smooth jazz.
Yeah, jazz. Jazz under the stars. He's trying to sound like Barry White.
Right, he had it. I'm sorry, Charles. Go ahead and do your thing, man. My bad.
I just want to let everybody know this is going to be the cadence of this show. It's going to be very interesting. So now, I feel okay. So back.
I totally threw you off. I'm sorry, bro.
This is how it is. This is how it is behind the scenes. So this is exciting that everybody else gets to see it.
And he wanted to put this on video.
Oh man, this is great. All right, we're gonna get through this. Yes. So just kind of behind the scenes, kind of with the website and kind of just piecing all the systems and operations together. Just one cog on the big wheel that keeps the things going. I'm just humbled and excited to be a part of the team as both a fan of the Just Thinking podcast platform, but then also just help. This is a platform that definitely believes in the sufficiency of Scripture, and there's much more that I would rather do than come alongside brothers and sisters in Christ that stand firm on it. So that's pretty much it.
Charles Simpson Sr., ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for Charles Simpson Sr.
Quiet storm.
That's gonna be his new nickname first. Quiet storm. All right.
If you can't tell, we have a good time. We do have a
good time. We have a good time. Thanks for that, Charles. I appreciate it. We'll be back to Charles later on in the episode on Quiet Storm. Next, Ms. Rachel Fink. Rachel, introduce yourself to our listeners, please.
I am Rachel Fink, as you announced, and I don't have that smooth jazz quality that Charles does, but I do feel bad for him that he has to put up with us. I am a stay-at-home wife and mom. I homeschool my 5 kids here in Washington State, and I am the social media coordinator for you guys, so I'm responsible for most of what goes up on all our social media platforms.
Thank you, Rachel. Anything else you want to tell us about yourself? Charles took more time than that. I mean, do you want more time? You want equal time?
Well, Charles got beat up most of that time, though. You got it.
Yeah, I don't want to be heckled.
That's Charles' fault.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty good. I'm hiding out.
What do you do as our social media coordinator? Can you get more specifics?
Yeah, so I schedule everything that gets posted. So everything that you see come across almost all our social media platforms, I made it happen, basically, with a lot of help.
I was about to say, so Rachel, you don't need any help. She's like,
with a lot of help. With a lot of help.
Thank you, Rachel. Rachel Fink, everybody. Give it up for Rachel Fink. Give it up for Rachel Fink.
We're adding applause right there.
Next is Joe Z. I like to call him Joe Z. Joe's the newest member of our team. So, Joe, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell them what you do in supporting the JT podcast team, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm, like you said, I'm the newest member of the team, and my role on the team is to be the visual communicator. So a lot of the graphics that show up online and social, working with Rachel to get those put out, just to promote the show, coordinating the look and feel of our visuals, and just being part of this great team and humble to serve.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for being on the team, man. I would just say I'm going to embarrass all three of these guys, but they are some of the most talented people I know. I mean, individually, the way God has gifted them is just unbelievable. They all have a love for the word, number one, love for the Lord, which qualifies them most importantly to be a part of the team. But these are some talented individuals in Charles, Rachel, and Joe. And I would say Verge, probably the guy who's probably more behind the scenes than anyone would be our executive producer, Dawain Atkinson. Right? Would you agree with that, Verge?
Dawain, absolutely, hardest working man in podcast land.
Hardest working man in podcast land. Dawain, introduce yourself to our listeners, brother.
Yeah, this is Dawain Atkinson. Just kidding. I had to do it. I could not resist. But no, this is Dawain. Just like they said, hardest working man in podcast land. Executive producer. I just God gave us this vision, man, and I'm just grateful for it, and we've been running with it ever since.
Yeah, Dawain, let me ask you this: how many? We call you the hardest working man in podcast land for a reason. That is a well-earned, hard-earned nickname, sort of a hard-earned moniker that I kind of gave you that, man. I think I'm the one who kind of gave you that nickname. But
you're always giving out monikers, man. You always giving out monikers.
Yeah, because they're earned though, bro. So you just can't slap a nickname on somebody, man, and just it's got to have significance and meaning, But yeah,
I got you.
That's the same. That's the same with Dawain. Dawain, tell them what you do in addition to being an executive producer of the Just Thinking podcast, man. Tell the folks what you do when you're. I don't want to say when you're not working with us, because you're always working with us. But tell them what you do in addition to working with us.
So, in addition to working with the Just Thinking podcast, I also, I guess you could say, brand and publish and produce several other podcasts. The network, the Bar Podcast Network, is kind of my birth child, I guess, if you want to say. but I do over 9 different podcasts. I help with production, marketing. Just built a network of podcasts that provide really biblical sound. Podcasts. It's just something that I always wanted to do. Podcasts influenced me so much. And when I built the Bar podcast, then we were able to bring on other podcasts as well to create the network. And so I have my hands in all 9 of those podcasts, as well as this huge monster of Just Thinking. And that's how I earned the title.
Indeed. Now you also coach people on how to do a podcast, right?
That's right. Yes, sir. I started this year just coaching and consulting podcasters, because like I said, I'm a really big advocate when it comes to podcasting. I mean, it's it's a form of media that's not regulated by a big company like TBN or CBS. You literally can start a podcast if you have a microphone and a computer, or even just a phone. And so I make sure I make myself available for people, and I teach them not only how to create the podcast, but how to come up with content ideas, connect them with talented people like Charles and Joe to help them take things to the next level.
Awesome, man. Well, we're going to be back to Dawain here in just a second. But so thanks for that. And I can't thank you enough, Dawain, for all you've done. We're going to come back to you a little bit later when we talk about the history of JT and how this all came to be. But in the meantime, what I want to do is throw it over to Verge to have some dialogue with you, Dawain. I thought it would be interesting to give our folks who are listening some background on how the Just Thinking podcast came together, the street and everything about that. So let me throw it over to you, Verge, for that part.
One of the things I think that's great about getting a chance to do this is that over the course of the last maybe month, 2 months, 3 months or so, we've picked up a lot of listeners. we have picked up a massive audience of people who are now listening to Just Thinking and have no real background of our story. So one of the reasons why I'm excited about the fact that we're doing this particular episode is that reality is that we got all these new folks listening. There's some folks, and I know each of you have seen this either in social media, in the social media platform, or on an inbox somewhere, where someone has made the statement, "Hey, I just found you guys during this George Floyd episode." Now that was what, episode number 98, right? And so because of that one episode, they're going backwards and they're starting to listen to a lot of our older material. The thing that's great about that is what they're finding is we ain't saying nothing new, right? I know that's not proper English, but that's my point. We've been saying the same kinds of things for 98 episodes, for 100 episodes now. And so they're able to go back and hear us utilize that same, biblical hermeneutic for every cultural context that we come into contact with. But going back, just historically speaking, I know Dawain and I connected way back in the day when I was doing False Teacher Fridays on my Facebook page.
Yep.
And Dawain kind of followed me, picked me up, and had me doing and kind of another thing that he had called Be Not Deceived. And this was years ago. This was even before he had started the Bar podcast. And he was kind of growing and going and doing his thing, and asked me to come alongside and just kind of hang out and help out where needed. And we just kind of developed our relationship that way. Now I know that during the Bar podcast, he came across, and I'll let him share a little bit of this story as well. He came across Darrell and was reading some of his blogs and some of the things that he was doing. And I remember after the interview, before the interview actually went live, I think Dawain reached out to me and just said, "Hey, I ran into this brother. You guys sound a lot alike, just the way you articulate things, the way you think, and I think it'd be great for you guys to connect." And so I said, "Man, I want to listen to the interview that you did with Darrell." When I listened to it, I went, "Oh snap! I gotta circle back and talk to that brother." And I had a chance that Dawain was kind enough to let me do that on the bar podcast. And so I did that, and we had an immediate connection, both Darrell and I, just kind of like lost brothers who had found each other. And that episode went incredibly long. And I at that point, I just was trying to convince Darrell that all of the great things that he was doing on his blog, that if he wanted to establish a new platform, that I would definitely be willing to partner with him and help him do that. Let me toss to Dawain and kind of let you give a rundown, maybe historically speaking, of what your thought was, why you thought this would be a good endeavor for us, and those kinds of things.
Right. Yeah. So you covered the basic, when I had Darrell on the show. I think I called you right after we finished recording, like literally, because if you just think about the culture, there's a lot of big names speaking from the quote unquote woke perspective. And so whenever I heard Darrell, I was like, wait a minute, like this guy, because the article I read, Darrell, was the how the wokeness is destroying the church or something. It was some title like that. And when I titled
it how woke theology is weakening the black church.
That's it. Yep. So when I heard that, and then I had Darrell on, because at the same time, Virgil, we had already connected Be Not Deceived. We did the Warrior for Truth radio. Virgil has some radio experience. And when I started the whole Bar podcast, I wanted to, me and Virgil tried out something. You remember Driven, Virgil? Virgil had this video vlog called Driven. So I knew Virgil had a voice and wanted to get him out there. And then when I heard Darrell, and I was like, whoa, this guy sounds like V. Like I see V posting videos talking about, the culture, and Darrell was saying all the same things. And I was like, man, this would be an awesome, duo. I let Virgil know. Virgil wanted to interview him. That was a great show. And then, Darrell's show by itself is still top 5 all time podcasts. I have over 300 podcasts recorded, Darrell, and your podcast is still top 5 from that episode when you were on by yourself. And so all of that stuff resonated. And I remember so clearly, man, I approached Virgil first. I was like, hey, man, what you think about, maybe partner with Darrell doing, some, because the original is going to be just maybe some episodes here and there, just kind of cover things spot. And Virgil has always been, hey, bro, whatever you need, I'm there. I love to back you up, whatever. So then I reached out to Darrell and I said, hey, Darrell, I led with your podcast is killing. You're the number one podcast episode I got on my network. I mean, on my show, and everybody really enjoyed it. A lot of good feedback. What do you think about doing a podcast? And Darrell said no. so so I gave it some time. I reached out to V. I was like, hey, I don't know if he's feeling it. And then I don't know, Virgil, did you ever get to talk back with Darrell before I went back to him? I can't remember that part.
All I remember setting up the interview that we did, and then I can speak from my end. I had such a great time talking with him, and it was so natural. So it wasn't a forced thing. I didn't feel like I was in. I had interview questions, but it felt more like two brothers just having a conversation about issues. And I just felt it was such a natural kind of chemistry that at the end of it, I just said, hey, man, I love your stuff. I love what I'm reading. And if you think about doing something, let me know. And so I'd like to, I've said this in the past, I'd like to think that it was my winsome ways and my sales acumen that tilted the bar, but I don't know. Darrell would have to speak to that himself.
Well, I don't remember the exact time that I got a yes, because the conversation continued, and finally, he was on board. We were talking about, naming it Just Thinking, just like the blog, Just Thinking Podcast, extension of the blog. And I remember when you guys first started, and I was like, V, like, this can't be an interview every time. Like, I wanted it to be a conversation. I don't know if y'all remember that. And I was like, I want you guys to kind of dialogue back and forth. And lo and behold, man, the more you guys started talking, it just developed into this beautiful conversation, and then a beautiful dialogue. And then what a lot of people don't know is we did several episodes before y'all met each other face to face. Several.
Right.
And so that always blew people away, that we were producing such, great content, great flow, great chemistry, something I actually just talked about on my recent podcast coaching episode. Great chemistry, all of that, just from the continuing conversation and being like-minded brothers and believers, man. And the rest is history, man. We're right here 100 episodes later.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Just to give our listeners some additional insight, the reason I said no at the initial invitation from Dawain and Virgil is because I'm a good speaker. I still don't think I'm a very good articulator verbally. I think my gift was writing. Content to just stay behind the blog, stay, unseen, unknown, unheard. Shall we say? I was more comfortable writing. I still am. I'm more comfortable articulating my thoughts in writing. So I'm definitely more comfortable sitting behind the keyboard. And I didn't feel like I was talented. I just didn't have the gifts to get behind a microphone. Never, unlike Virgil and Dawain, I didn't have the experience and the resume on radio and doing podcasts before. That was a brand new medium for me as far as participating in it. I'd been doing the blog for a couple years. Matter of fact, even the blog wasn't my idea. I had a couple from a former church that I was a member of back in Atlanta who'd been reading a lot of my commentary. I used to write a lot of political commentary on my Facebook page a few years ago. And they reached out to me and said, hey, Darrell, I've been reading your stuff on Facebook. You should consider starting a blog. And I told them no also. I resisted that idea for about 6 months. So, but it's kind of become an inside joke here on the team now. It's like, look what God does every time I say no to something.
Right.
God totally flips the script. So just like I said no to the blog, I ended up starting the blog and launching it. I've been doing it now for about 8 years on the blog, and now we're coming up on 2.5 years doing the Just Thinking podcast. But with the cool thing about doing the podcast is that I still get to lean in on my what I think are my strongest skill set, and that's writing, which comes into play, right, Virgil, when we're doing our research. preparing.
Oh, does it
for
come
every
into
episode.
play, brother? Oh, it comes into play.
So we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I thought it'd be interesting. And I appreciate Dawain and Virg giving our listeners some background on the history of how the Just Thinking podcast came together, how God and his providence brought us together, especially after I had turned down initially the invitation to do this. And as you said, Dawain, here we are now, 100 episodes later. It's unbelievable. And let me say this, let me just add this, and Virg, you can add some color to this, no pun intended. You can add some color to this, bro, if you if you want. But
look,
I
I'll
want
go
to
back
let
to
folks
my
know.
Black Power nap, man. Don't trip. I'll go back to the Black Power nap. It'll take me just a minute, bam, and I'm out.
When we started this, when we launched this podcast, and even to this day, growth, numbers, episodes, none of that was a motivation. None of that was an impetus for us doing the podcast. We as Dawain mentioned, Virgil and I have developed a chemistry, a repertoire, if you will, a rapport. We have a repertoire as well. We got 100 episodes, but we developed definitely a rapport with one another, and so that's just love for the Lord, love for rightly dividing His word, especially up against the sociocultural dynamics that we're seeing, especially the last couple years. This platform gives us an opportunity to objectively convey and wrap around these issues the word of God, his objective truth. So that's what drives us. We're never concerned about numbers. We never have been. We're not concerned about that today. And I pray we never get into that sort of mindset where statistics start to motivate us for what we do, which is one reason why we take so long to do what we do in every episode. So, and I want to thank our listeners again, because the Just podcast is a long form podcast. It is a long form podcast. This is not a podcast for everybody. Okay. We appreciate that. We respect that. But Virgil and I, we go deep into the topics that we tackle, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So that's just more reason for us to appreciate our listeners who hang in there with us, because the length of our episodes, the average length of our episodes, is not the norm. Is not the norm. We've got some topics that are 2 hours long, a little more than 2 hours long, some of them. But our listeners know that that's what we do. That's what we do on the Just Thinking podcast. So we appreciate them very, very much. So let's continue on in this conversation. I want to go around again with our behind us support staff with Charles, Rachel, and Joe. Let me start with Charles. Let me start with Quiet Storm and ask him, Charles. This question's for everybody, but I'm gonna start with Charles. How'd you first hear about the Just Thinking podcast? Okay, three-part question. How did you first hear about the Just Thinking podcast? Second part is, if you have a favorite Just Thinking podcast episode, what is it and why? Okay, and the third part of the question is, how'd you end up becoming a part of the Just Thinking podcast core team, brother? Let's start with Charles, then we'll go with Rachel, and then we'll go to Joe.
So first heard about the podcast through listening to Ali Stuckey's podcast, Relatable, and now when she was interviewing Virgil, and then I was like, oh, what's this about? So then checked it out. Actually, first podcast that I listened to, one that still stuck with me today. It's hard to have a favorite. I mean, there's so many good ones, but I would say that abortion episode was solid. A lot of nuggets in there, just about a mass genocide that's still taking place and mandated. But I would say that's probably my favorite, and that's how I heard about the podcast. And from there, actually went back over to the bar, and I had subscribed to the bar months ago, but never listened to an episode. And then I was like, oh, the bar, they're affiliated with Just Thinking. Oh, so let me check out the bar now.
Tisk.
I know, right? The perfect time to let Dawain know all this.
Yeah, that's news. That's news to you, isn't it, Dawain?
Right.
Subscribe but never listen.
Dang.
Yeah, that was it.
Wow.
But that was an awesome nugget as well with the bar. And I think the biggest thing is that jumped out to me with Dawain and giving a platform, especially to reform voices, to get the word out. But as far as working with Just Thinking, it started with me doing the image quotes, and I would do those and tag the team. And because I kind of created a little communication with Dawain, I kind of felt like, all right, well, let me go ahead and reach out to Dawain about some things about Just Thinking, and just how all these ideas was running down, because I was learning new concepts like CRT and all of these things that were just completely new to me. And for me, it was giving them ideas on how to give like little cheat sheets, and how to give these massive concepts into small bite-sized chunks. And then from there, it was just, in partnering with Dawain, it presented an opportunity to make the website and pretty much just try to help with marketing operations. One big thing for me is content creation. The content that Darrell and Virgil put out, it's just massive. I mean, just from all the feedback we get, it's encouraging so many people. And for me, the content is a moving train. And for me, was just coming alongside and just giving what God has blessed me to be able to do to strengthen that train to reach every heart and mind that needs encouragement during these times. So by God's will and providence, was able to get on the team, and the rest is history. Like I said, it's been edifying to me, encouraging to me, just to be a servant. And that's pretty much it.
That's cool.
Well, Charles, thanks a lot for that, man. Charles, seriously, bro, I don't mean to embarrass you here, man, but this guy is incredibly talented. He's incredibly talented. He's incredibly passionate about what he does. His contribution to the team is really taking us to another level. His work on the website, his work on behind the scenes on processes and things like that are just amazing. So, thanks for being on board, Charles, and being a part of the team, man. We appreciate you being here.
To God be the glory.
Ms. Fink.
Yes.
Ms. Fink.
So,
same questions for you.
All right, I got it. I first heard about you guys at the Truth Matters conference in October of 2019.
That's the first time you've heard of us?
So bad.
That's insane.
I had heard Darrell's name, I think a few years before. I think I'd read maybe one or two blog posts of his several years previous, but nothing. My sister was like, hey, we got to go check out that breakout session with the Just Thinking guys. And we were like, we got to give up the food trucks for this? Okay. So we went, and I heard you guys live that night. Then later I introduced myself to Dawain, because I was like, here's the guy that doesn't look like he's on the front lines, but he's doing all this amazing amount of work behind the scenes to make brilliant things happen. And as a wife and a mom, I appreciated that role a lot. So I remember complimenting him and being like, hey, I appreciate everything you do to make this happen. These guys are on fire. And so I chatted with you guys there as well. I kind of stalked you around the campus for a couple days. And then I started listening to you guys and keeping in communication with you over the next few months, just about random things here and there through different mediums, and chit-chatting here and there. And then Dawain reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to do more of the image stuff to relieve Charles so he could devote his energies to the more of the web marketing end of things? And I said, of course, I would love to. And I had the longest tryout in history. And then I got put on the team, and it's been great. And my favorite episode, this was really hard for me to think through, but my favorite episode, I have to say, is episode 94, which is Do Not Love the World, which you can hear by going to justthinking.me/094, because it really pulled out the rug of false reliance on little things that had crept into my own heart and life during a lot of the stress of this last spring. So it just kind of shook me a little bit, and it just brought some things to light that I hadn't seen in my own life before. So that's me.
I remember you saying, awesome, Rachel, that episode brought you to tears a couple times, a couple spots in the episode.
Yeah, it was so good. It was so good. It was so convicting, and the Holy Spirit really used it in my life, and I'm sure lots of other people's lives as well.
Wonderful.
Can I add one thing about Rachel?
Go ahead, Charles. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll say Rachel came in and held her own. Behind the scenes, we have a little group that we kind of keep updated on what are we working on for the platform in our individual areas. And I mean, Rachel just came through and just melted right in. And like I said, it was really good because she did take quite a bit of responsibility and just took it and owned up to it and just took it to the next level. Like the 10,000 followers we just hit as a milestone for Instagram, which has been a blessing by the content. But Rachel's been really holding that down. So it's been, I appreciate that because it has been great bringing on people to really help grow the platform. And like I said, that's all Dawain as well, because he knows how to feel people out. So it's definitely been good. So thank you for Rachel. I just want to share that.
Oh, you're
That's
welcome.
awesome.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for your contributions, Rachel. Absolutely. They're incredibly valuable. Joe is the newest member of the
How did Joe get here, man? That's what I want. I want to know how.
Yeah,
I just snuck in. I just snuck in the back door.
How in the world did Joe get on the team?
Talk to Dawain.
Talk to us, Joe.
Yeah. First of all, I'm just blessed to be part of the team. Mine is a little more organic. The way I came across your podcast, my wife's cousin who lives in Kansas City, shout out to him, posted it on social, and then she forwarded it to me, and I started listening to it, and it just hit me like a ton of lead. And what hit me most about it was the way Virgil and Darrell put the gospel front and center, and there's no interpretation. There's no mixing in ingredients to turn it into something it isn't. And it just hit me. And so after a few episodes, I started following you, Darrell, on Twitter. And eventually I was sitting at my desk and just felt this, and I don't say this sort of flippantly, it's just this overwhelming feeling, this pull to reach out to you. And you were gracious enough to answer back. And so he put me in touch with Dawain. And I think maybe Dawain, that same day we had a call and started talking. And I just told him what I was about and what I wanted to do, and offer any help that I could offer. And if we didn't work together on the podcast, I think we'd still be friends. I knew we'd be friends, and I'd still be listening. So I think it was providence, and I just felt just this really, really strong pull to reach out, and it was just been a blessing so far to be part of this team and be on this team and just watch you guys work and watch you guys interact behind the scenes, and now that I'm behind the scenes, it's just been a blessing for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad to have you on the team, Joe. Joe, do you have a favorite episode?
I do. The first one that really turned me on to the podcast was, of course, the George Floyd podcast. But as I started to listen into more of the shows, I'd go back to episode 77, which is the nuanced gospel. I think it applies to what's going on today in the church. It just opened my eyes to what is being taught, and be more critical about thinking about how the gospel, some might take the gospel and reimagine it and turn it into something that fits their narrative. So after that, this idea that you can shape the gospel to anything you want. I mean, that episode really opened my eyes, and because of that, my wife and I, we've had so much more fruitful conversations about the gospel. And I can't tell you how many times, Darrell, and Virgil, we've brought up your names in our household to talk about things, and it just led to these really rich conversations about the gospel. So I'd say episode 77 really stuck with me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow, Joe, thank you, man. That's very humbling, actually. That's incredibly humbling. Virg, anything you have, man, to add to anything that you've heard our three supporting cast members say about themselves, their contribution to the team?
Go ahead,
Virg.
I just wanted to publicly say, man, and I've said this behind the scenes to these guys here. I so appreciate them. I'm so humbled and honored that the three of you with the giftings that God has given you would link up with us. It has been a difference maker for Just Thinking, and I know that God has graced us to be where we are, due in no small part to the contributions that each of you have made as a part of our team, and so I'm grateful for that. I'm humbled, like Joe. When you said, hearing you talk about your wife and you and having gospel conversations on the basis of something that we've said and shared. I hear that, and Darrell and I have been at conferences, whether it's a G3 conference or a GTY conference, whether it's ShepCon or Truth Matters. We've been to a number of different conferences. We've been to different churches that have had us, that have hosted us, and every time we run into listeners who say, man, God has used the podcast to bless them, we both, Darrell and I, pause. And it's because of the fact that we are truly blown away when and we'll talk later about getting notes and and all of that, and how we put the show together. But once we get on the microphones and do what we do, we never really know directly what the
Right.
impact has been.
Right.
We know we felt good about the fact that we've done all that we could behind a microphone to honor God with the topic, with the subject, based upon the flow of what Scripture has to say about the subject matter, that we feel confident about. But we never know what impact it has. So when we get a chance to hear stories like yours, Joe, or Rachel, or Charles, when hey, my favorite episode was this, and this was how it impacted me, and this was the conversation that I had as a result, or this is where we took something you said and dug a little deeper, and we are blown away.
Yeah.
We're blown away by that, and I could just speak personally. I'm speechless. Like, my jaw's dropped. I'm just going, wow. The fact that God could use a platform where I take a microphone, stick it into my laptop, sitting in my living room, and have impact on somebody 1,000 miles away because of the power of God's word transforming hearts, is just mind-blowing. I'm just humbled and honored to be a part. Thank you guys for everything that you do. Appreciate it a ton. And Darrell, I'll turn it back over to you, bro.
I like to add before you take that, Darrell, that definitely grateful for these three as well. And I want to also add that before there was these three, it was just me doing all of those tasks. So
That's right.
Just so y'all know.
Dawain had to wear a tool belt. He was doing so much.
I'm telling you. I am grateful for these folks.
No doubt.
One interesting thing about what Joe said, when Joe brought up that his favorite episode was the one that we titled "A Nuanced Gospel" with a question mark. In a way, that's a primary reason why you and I catch a lot of flack from certain people, because we refuse to nuance the gospel. We absolutely refuse to do that. We refuse to do that. This is the Just Thinking podcast. Is not only is it a long form podcast, the reason it's a long form podcast is because it's an expositional podcast. Okay, so we don't just hold our finger up in the air and say, well, okay, which way is the wind blowing today? Then maybe we should follow. That's maybe where we should go. No. Whatever topic Virgil and I land on, we put in work. Okay, we put in work. We exposit, we exegete, we rely on hermeneutical, corrected hermeneutical interpretation. We take this very seriously. But one of the reasons, probably the primary reason, we don't get a lot of negative feedback, comparatively speaking, because as Virgil was saying, we're blown away. And Virgil, I have to say, probably with the G3 conference in Atlanta earlier this year, right, was just unbelievable. When people would walk up to us, they would either see me at the Grace to You booth, see you at the bar booth, just incredible. But the negative feedback that we do get is for folks who are in such a lane in terms of their agenda, that they don't ding us because we've interpreted something wrong. They ding us because we don't agree with them. So because we don't nuance anything, they can't tolerate that for some reason. For some reason, they cannot tolerate that we will not nuance God's word. So that just came to my mind, Joe, when you mentioned that that's your favorite episode. But that's something that that's undergirds or underlies rather a lot of the critical commentary that Virgil and I will get for our podcast. But I just thought that was very, very interesting. Virgil, anything you want to come behind that with?
No, man, I think that's spot on, brother. I really do. I know we've got some more ground to cover, but man, I'm again just grateful for that. And Dwayne's right, man. He held down all these hats that others are now wearing. He held it down for us. So definitely grateful for the maestro, the man who put it all together.
Listen, man, Dawain knew what he was signing up for. Dawain, listen, this was Dawain. I can't let Dawain complain too much because this was Dwayne's idea. This was Dwayne's idea.
Right.
True.
Right.
Dwayne knew what he was signing up for.
Right.
Verge, I don't think we can leave our listeners hanging like this. Somebody's probably listening and thinking to themselves, well, Darrell and Verge, you guys didn't tell us what your favorite episode is, if you have one. Verge, do you have a favorite episode?
Yeah.
Bro, it's hard. We've done 100 of these.
I know,
I've got so many of them.
It's hard.
It's hard. And so I can tell you honestly right now, and this may change. Like if you ask me 6 months from now, this may change. But right now, my favorite episode is episode number 99, where we talk about the assurance of salvation. It is by far my favorite.
Wow.
The amount of content that we placed in that. I mean, the George Floyd episode was great, but hands down, the assurance of salvation has blessed me personally. And when I think about the context of the conversations that I have as a pastor, in counseling, in disciple making, there is no greater resource that I could pull from a library of our episodes than the assurance of salvation episode number 99. It was over a 2-hour episode. I don't know how many dozens of Puritans.
I know
I know you do. You do.
I think we quoted.
I mean,
I think we quoted 22. I think we quoted 22 human authors in that episode, and we referenced over 70 Bible verses.
Right.
In that one episode.
All of that power, all that power packed into one episode. And so I think by far for me, my favorite episode. It's the one I've listened to most recently more than any other.
I have a different favorite episode, but I will say this about the Assurance of Salvation episode number 99. I love the story behind that episode, bro. I love the story that's behind why we did that episode in the first place. Because and those of you who've listened to the episode, you already know this already. This may be a little bit of a spoiler for those who haven't heard it. But that episode came about, we get requests for episodes all the time. People will email us. They'll hit us up on social media saying, hey, would you guys consider doing an episode on this topic or that topic? But the Assurance of Salvation episode came about from a tweet that I sent, just, something that was on my mind at that time. And I was just moved to send a tweet out addressing those who may be struggling in that area, who may be doubting their salvation, who may be fearful that they're not saved. And within a couple of hours of sending that tweet, it received over 1,300 likes and had been retweeted over 300 times. And that told me immediately, okay, this is an issue for a lot of believers out there. This is an absolutely legit area wherein many professing Christians are struggling, they're battling, and we need to do something. We need to do our part to reassure them. So Virgil and I, and the process is really simple. When Virgil and I land on a topic, we'll just text one another till we land on one. If I'm convicted about something, he may be convicted about another topic. We will text one another, or if it's something that's what we can't seem to necessarily agree on, we'll get on the phone and we'll talk it through. But that's normally the process. It's a very innocuous process. Nothing really involved. He and I have done enough of these episodes now where we can just pretty much settle on a topic within a couple text messages. So that's what I did. I texted him. Go ahead, Dawain.
I would say let's be real about the text message exchange, because I'm there. It's usually Virgil sending ideas, Darrell saying no, and then I got it. So Virgil sparks Darrell's idea, because Virgil sending an idea. Nah, I'm not feeling that, bro. Let's think about that, bro. Oh, here we go. That's good. I got it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. What was the last topic that happened on?
I can't remember. But
the last one would have been the George Floyd episode. I don't know. I don't know that we really texted much on that one.
Y'all talked on that one.
We talked on the phone because I guess Virgil knew.
I called you.
Virgil knew I was going to say no. He said,
I know. How, let me break down how George Floyd happened. Okay, because first of all, you had said no. Okay, you said nope. That's not. We're not doing it. And I got it. I was like, okay, because we had just come out of the Ahmaud Arbery case, and we had already kind of. I mean, you and I have been talking about this subject forever, and I just, you were just not feeling it. And I said, okay, but by Thursday, I think after the incident took place, we were both having other leaders, other pastors, other folks that we knew, other people that we respected reach out, text, hey, let me get your thoughts on this, let me get your thoughts on that. And so I just circled back with you finally at kind of a last ditch effort and said, bro, I really think we need to talk about this. And you had somebody come to your office who I won't name, I'm sure you might, who asked you if we were going to talk about the topic. And I think you even told that person, no, you had no plans to do that.
Yeah, that person is the executive director of Grace to You, Phil Johnson. Phil Johnson just happened to come by my office one afternoon and just asked, hey, are you guys going to touch on this George Floyd situation? I said, no, Phil, we don't have any plans to do that. And, if you could have seen the look on Phil's face, he was really disappointed. So I think I carried that guilt home on the drive home that afternoon.
Good. Well, then we've got Phil to thank, because by the time the conviction of the Lord hit your heart, I was then moved by the Spirit to call you, right?
I guess so. Yeah. Mr. Charismatic. Mr. Charismatic.
Right. I gotta go back to my charismatic days, man.
But it's kind of like I was saying before, man. Look at what God does whenever I say no. I usually say no to something, and then it turns out, God blesses it and makes it fruitful and everything. And I'm trying to right now. Matter of fact, if I can pull up a number real quick. Yeah, the George Floyd episode is just shy of 150,000 downloads right now.
Nice.
Just shy of 150,000 downloads right now. And as you mentioned at the top of this episode, Virgil, it was that episode that introduced us to a lot of people. A lot of our listeners now are relatively new to the podcast. But I didn't want to do the George Floyd episode because we'd already covered that ground in so many other episodes previous to that. Okay. Which leads me to my favorite episode, which is the whiteness episode. Whiteness episode number 67.
I love how one of our fans typed that out. They typed it HWIT. I like that.
White.
HWITESS.
So if you're a fan of the Just Thinking podcast and if you want to articulate whiteness phonetically, you have to pronounce that H in front of the W. Okay, it's whiteness. The reason the whiteness episode is my favorite episode is because we were able to leverage the language of blackness. Okay, the language of Black liberation theology, the language of sources of renowned sources of Black liberation theology, James Cone, okay, Kelly Brown Douglas, people like that, we were able to use their
Kimberly
own
Crenshaw.
words, Kimberly Crenshaw,
Yeah.
to make an argument of why they should not have an issue with whiteness because they all talk so much about Blackness. Okay, so I love how we were able to use their own words in a hermeneutic against them. So the whiteness episode is my favorite episode, closely followed probably by the slavery reparations episode. The slavery reparations episode, because we opened that episode up with slave narratives. I think I quoted about 5 or 6 slave narratives.
That was one of my favorites.
Yeah. So anyway, hopefully our listeners will get a kick out of knowing that background from all of us. So okay, let's keep moving here. Verge.
Yes,
the
sir.
Hammond B3, bro. The Hammond B3, man. Help us out. What is the Hammond B3? What's the significance of the Hammond B3, and why has Hammond B3 become so popular, man, with our listeners on to the Just Thinking podcast?
Well, I will tell you, man, I was trying to recall when we first instituted it. Here's what I do know. You and I come from very ridiculously similar backgrounds.
Yes.
As we would come learn over the course of our time together, very similar backgrounds from a standpoint of kind of church experience, even familial experiences, man, with your brother, my brother. I mean, just crazy.
Yeah, that's
one
crazy.
of the things that we isn't that crazy? But one of the things that we both have in common is that we have been a part of the quote unquote Black church for quite some time. And so we have those roots in that space. And so it's been fun because you and I get on these microphones and talk about stuff and speak in shorthand to one another. And talk about, they should have broke out the Hammond B3 on that. And, and we talk about those things. And you and I, because of the fact that we have such similar backgrounds with regard to church experience, can talk about the Hammond B3 and how it's used in the Black church to kind of emphasize and what a pastor would say and amplify a certain point in a message. And you and I knew what that was and how to do that. And what's interesting is as we were kind of joking and talking about that, and we began to kind of develop that Hammond B3 moment. That'd be that moment when you got on kind of a soapbox of something and kind of went on a rant, and I'd be like, man, we just need that Hammond B3. Now Dawain would have to explain when he came up with the inserting this mascot into the shows, but yeah, that's the background. We the Black church, we always had pastors who would they kind of tune up a little bit,
and the Hammond would come in.
You had that Hammond come right on in on time and amplify that point that you were making. And so we did that kind of back and forth, kind of tongue in cheek, and have exposed now a whole new, very conservative, even reformed audience to what it means to have a Hammond B3 moment within the dialogue and the conversations that we have, which I think is hilarious, man. It's awesome.
And I think I started calling it the mascot because we had come to use it so frequently. So it's like wherever we were, there the Hammond was. It's like a high school or college mascot. Where when a game's being played, there's the mascot that's always there. So for our listeners' sake, sometimes we may refer to it as the Hammond. I might say, hey, bring it. Where's the B3? Or I'll say, cue the mascot. So when I say cue the mascot, that's what I'm talking about. Is the Hammond B3 comes in. So all right, cool. Appreciate that. Appreciate that, Verge. Verge, what are some of the challenges, man, for you in preparing and producing an episode of the Just Thinking podcast?
Well, I think the first part of it for me is you and I mean, people may think we have this library of ideas that we are running with, and to the point you made earlier, I mean, we don't. I mean, we literally get done with one episode, and as I close the laptop and lay my head down, the next morning I'm already thinking about what we're going to do next.
Yep.
And so it's not one of those things where I got like 10 topics and we're rolling, because I know within the week you're probably by we record on a Sunday, so by Monday or Tuesday after the show is dropped on Wednesday, and usually it doesn't drop on Wednesday because we're asking Dawain to drop it early. We
Yep.
we're already thinking about what's coming up next, and I think people don't realize how seriously we take, or maybe they do, how seriously we take each episode and the topics and the subject matter. And so I may have 3 or 4 ideas, and Dawain mentioned it. I may shoot you an idea or two that you're like, well, I'm not feeling that. I'm not feeling that. And I've learned to trust that, man. I've learned to not push in a space where you're not ready to dive in. And I'm pretty easy breezy. So like if you come at me, hey, I'm gonna do X, Y, or Z, I'm your wingman. So I'm gonna say, hey, let's do it. You figure out where you want to go, and I'll jump into the mix of that and try to make that work. But more times than not, we do land on something and get agreement between you and I. And while you begin to write, I'm already thinking about you come up with a thesis based upon a topic or a
Right.
subject. So like Black Lives Matter or whatever. And so you're trying to think of how do I want to approach that would be uniquely that would be unique to Just Thinking. And so while you're developing and creating that, I'm already having to make sure that I'm up to speed on the subject and have enough knowledge about it to kind of do kind of a choreographed dance, man, because you're going to come with a straight line of logic, and I've got to come with something in between those spaces. I think I'll give you a great example of the one that we did with the Assurance of Salvation episode. Man, you had a line of reasoning that you were going to go down based upon all the stuff that you had pulled together. And as I thought about that topic, it took me a good 3 days, even before I got your notes, to really begin thinking through how do I want to approach this. And so I knew that based upon the fact that you were going to have so many rich quotes, so much theology, that it was best for me to come at it not from a biblical theology standpoint, but from a practical theological standpoint. I had to think about practical application. I had to think about it from a standpoint of the role of a counselor, the role of a pastor, a pastor. How can I approach this topic pastorally? As I begin to have conversation about it. So those are the kinds of things that as you prepare, I'm thinking about and trying to navigate as we put subjects together. So while yours is, well written out and put together, I'm really thinking about how do I dance in between the lines of where you've gone so that we can create a full balanced approach to the content that we deliver.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Verge. And you're kind of segueing into what the primary challenge is for me as I prepare on my end once we've landed on a topic. And I will say this, and this has been the case for each of the 100 episodes that we've done to this point, is that if Virgil and I don't feel, excuse me, if we don't feel a conviction about a topic, we won't do it. We will not record an episode if we're not feeling a conviction about the topic. Okay. So we're not motivated by popular opinion. We're not motivated by timeline. We're not motivated by wow, how long has it been since we did our last episode? No. We're not motivated by any of that. We have a very high standard on the Just Thinking podcast when it comes to the quality of the content. And that's what drives us. That's the primary motivator for when Virgil and I doing what we do when we get behind the microphone. We want to honor the Lord by giving him our best, okay? And right behind that is that we want to respect our listeners and give them our best, okay? So for me, I don't know what Virgil will say about this, but the preparation side, we put a ton of hours into research. We put a ton of hours into research. We cite every single quote. We cite every single reference point. We like I said earlier, this is an expository podcast. So unlike Verge, and this is where Verge and our styles kind of differ a little bit, but the Lord just really synergizes them incredibly well. I'm incredibly detailed when I research. My notes are literally verbatim. Okay. Virgil, he can work off of just bullet points and outline. So he's more of an outline kind of guy, where I'm more detailed in my approach, and I have to be detailed. Number one, that's just how I'm wired. But Virgil mentioned earlier how I like to not just land on a topic, but be convicted about the thesis that I want to argue. Okay, so for me, it begins with the thesis. Okay, so that's where I will write out very explicitly my logic or the theological or biblical angle that I'm going to approach to deal with this topic. Okay, what is my thesis going to be? Not necessarily to try to win on an issue, but for instance, and I'll go ahead and let our listeners know. Virgil kind of mentioned it a second ago. As we record this episode on what's today, the 26th, Sunday, July 26th. Our next scheduled episode is going to be on the topic of Black Lives Matter. Now, I don't know what the episode is going to be officially titled, but that's going to be the central topic that we're going to be talking about is Black Lives Matters. So if you're listening to this episode, you now know what the next topic is going to be about. And as we record this episode, Virg, I've got about 9.5 pages. We'll call it 10 pages of notes are written, but those 10 pages, and there will be more, is I'm arguing my thesis. I have landed on an aspect of the Black Lives Matters agenda that I'm going to argue, and then once I'm done, Virgil will come in and he will add whatever he wants to say to that. So that's how we pull an episode together. But we put in, and I'm not saying this to boast or anything like that, but we until we're satisfied with the quality of the content, we will not put an episode out. That's why sometimes I'll tell Verge, I've got 23, 24, 25 pages of notes. I wish I could recall, Verge, but I think I can. I think the Assurance of Salvation episode is probably the episode where I had the most notes in terms of page numbers. I think I sent you 24 pages, full pages of notes for that episode. Because again, as I said earlier, we quoted 20-something human authors, over 70-something Bible verses. But man, there was something, it's kind of like Joe said earlier, where he just felt kind of drawn to reach out to us. There was something within my heart. I felt so burdened for the people, the believers who are struggling with this issue. It's not like we don't do this every single episode, because we do put our emotional, spiritual, mental, we put everything in the bucket, bro. I mean, for every episode that we do. But that one, bro, I felt it was weighing on me to put myself in the shoes of those individuals who are going to hear this episode, and I wanted to make sure that we did everything we could to point them to Christ, point them to the fact that was my thesis. My thesis was simple: is that you need to be looking to Christ, the one who holds you. Don't look at yourself in terms of what you're doing or what you're not doing, because Satan will definitely use that to bring you down mentally, and then you're discouraged and you're depressed, and then worst case scenario, you're thinking you're not saved at all. So my thesis was to point to Christ. That was my simple thesis, and you came in and added your elements to it. Like you said, it ended up being over 2-hour episode. But that's how we work. I mean, we spend hours preparing for an episode, maybe 1 to 2 hour episode. We probably put in combined 50, 60 hours getting ready for a single episode. And so as we record this episode, I spent most of the weekend working on my notes for the Black Lives Matters episode. I can't say when it'll come out, probably within the next couple of weeks, but however long it takes for us to get prepared for it. But yeah, so that's a challenge. Most of the time for our prep work is research. For me anyway, is research, because we want to support everything we say. So you can go back and say, okay, where'd you get that quote from? Or where'd you get those statistics from? Where'd you get that? So when Rachel, for instance, when she gets ready to come up with a strategy about how she wants to promote the episode on social media, okay, we'll send her a copy of our notes once we're all done. and she should never have to reach out to you or me, Virgil, saying, okay, can you tell me where you got this from? She should already know.
Right.
So to make her job easier, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, you're absolutely right, Virgil. Once we hit stop, once we've recorded an episode, we might take a couple hours to kind of wind down a little bit, and then man, your mind is already thinking, okay, what's next? What's the next episode? So we just want to say to our listeners, we care about you. We really do. We care that you take the time out of your lives to listen to the Just Thinking podcast, and we will not ever shortcut. We will never take shortcuts in the content, in the production, in the quality of the visuals, in the quality of the website. We will never take shortcuts because we're going to be accountable. God's going to hold us accountable for how we use the treasure of His Word, and it really is a treasure. How we use His treasure on this platform. So not only do we want to honor God, as I said earlier, we also we have the utmost respect for our listeners, and we want to make sure that we give them accurate and quality content with every episode.
Darrell, I want to jump in here and add a couple things to what you said, and that is, everything you said is spot on. That's exactly how we do what we do. That's the motivation that we do what we do. It's to really be a benefit to the body of Christ, and so we want to glorify God in what we say. We want to be accurate with what we say, and we really want to use this platform for that reason. One of the reasons why we spend that much time putting in the work is because we don't take lightly anyone that chooses to start up a podcast and listen to us. We don't take that lightly. I've always said, if anybody has ever taken the time to listen to something I'm sharing, I want to make sure it's worth that time. We value their time, we respect their time, and so we want it to be. We want you to be able to get something from the Just Thinking podcast that you wouldn't be able to get anywhere else. You're not going to go find someone else doing the same kind of thing that we're doing in the same way that we do it. And once you've figured out our timing, and you figured out kind of our personalities and kind of the way we do it, you kind of become a part of the family. I mean, you become a part of a part of the rhythm of how we do what we do. And speaking of rhythms, that's kind of how I do my notes with regard to you. I mean, I know how you think and how you flow. And so a lot of times, man, I'm just trying to get into a pace and kind of a rhythm of where I want to punctuate something you said, or where I want to add content. Every once in a while, I'll grab I'll do some research and grab some notes from someone or a particular author. But for the most part, I'm really trying to listen to you, get a heartbeat from that, and come from more from a preaching platform, which is why I'm always I love what Rachel does with some of my notes. If you don't hear what I've said in its context, and you see it separated from that context, you're like, what is that brother talking about? And so
yeah,
that's why with regard to what I'm with, because all of it is based upon what you've just said previously, or an idea that was just put forth. And so that's why I like to, and again, some people recognize this when you're speaking and not reading, or haven't, or you're speaking not based upon something you've written. The way you say it sounds differently when it's written. The way you say it reads differently than when you're saying it verbally. And so that's why a lot of times I'll see something that I've said. I'm thinking, why did I say that way? It sounded good. It sounded good on the show, but man, written out, I'm like, man, my grammar was horrible, man. So it's one of those things that have to go clean up. But man, I'll say this and stop, man. It's been a sheer joy for me, man, being alongside you, because I've learned quite a bit about. I'll say this to you, and with all of our listeners listening, I've become a better preacher because of my time with you, Darrell. I've learned how to do a lot more, and studied and prep and all of that, because of preparing for the podcasts that we prepare for, and the manner in which we prepare for them. And so I think it's improved what I've done on the platform and in the pulpit as a result of our time together with Just Thinking.
Well, thank you, bro. I sure appreciate how the Lord has gifted you, man. Is so unique, as He's gifted all His people uniquely. And I just want to say, man, I look back on 100 episodes. I can't believe it's flown by. 100 episodes is absolutely flown by. It's a lot of fun working with you, Verge. Seriously, bro, it is fun working with you. As a matter of fact, it's fun working with all you guys because as you probably heard the banter that we had going back and forth at the top of the episode, this is kind of how we are behind the scenes. So you kind of have to have a little bit of a thick skin being on the JT team because we rib each other all the time. But yeah, it's a joy to work with you, Verge. So likewise, bro. Hey, Verge, while I have you, man, what is one thing? It could only be one thing that our listeners don't know about you that you think it'd be kind of cool for them to know, man. One thing.
I've got one thing, but the reason I'm going to share this is selfish, to be honest with you, because we have a lot of listeners who say, "Hey, man, if you're ever in the area, I would love for you to take you out for dinner, for this or for that." My favorite food of all time, and I could eat it 5 days a week, is actually Indian food.
Really? That's interesting.
Indian food.
Give me if we're at an Indian restaurant with a group or whatever, what would you order?
Yeah, anything chicken tikka masala, anything chicken korma, anything. I mean, I just love it, man. The spices, I love it. I've got a buddy of mine that when I was early married, early in my marriage, a dear brother who was Indian lived down the street in an apartment complex, and he got me hooked on Indian food. And bro, every weekend he would come over and sit down. He'd greet my wife. He'd sit down. We'd watch a Bollywood film, and we would eat Indian food. And
wow,
I was hooked. Yeah, I'm hooked. So
see, that's interesting, man. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, I love it. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Man.
Can I interject on that, Darrell?
Go ahead, Charles. Do your thing.
I feel like that trait might be something that falls under that brochure of whiteness, to be able to step out and experience all those things. That's not. I think that wouldn't be black. I think that's whiteness. I'm just a little confused.
That's confused. And Charles, I think you're onto something, because remember, man, in the whiteness episode, one of the points that we made was that whiteness is defined as anything that's not blackness.
Not blackness.
That is if you want a short definition of whiteness, it is anything, and I mean anything, that is not blackness. Okay, and I think Charles, I gotta give you props, bro. You just nailed something right there. I think,
wow.
Saturday
what you got,
with
bro?
Hollywood. That's not in the black household.
Oh my gosh, I can't argue with you, Verge. You're the first black person I know who likes Indian food.
I love Indian food, man.
You're the first black person I know who has said that Indian food is their favorite cuisine.
Right.
Favorite cuisine, man.
Your favorite. Now I know other I know other black people who like Indian food, but you're the first one I know of who has said that Indian food is their favorite type of cuisine.
Favorite. 5 days a week I'd eat Indian food, man.
By the way, since we're talking about food, I need to plug our a biblical theology of soul food episode.
I was wondering if you were gonna mention that.
Charles, can you do me a favor and look up that episode number for me, brother?
I'm on it.
Can you do that real quick? Biblical theology of soul food. We did an entire episode where I basically had to explain from scripture why it's okay to not like certain types of foods, because I got slammed I got stereotyped on Facebook, man. Wait a minute, you're a black guy, you're from the South. You mean to tell me you don't like collard greens, you don't like black eyed peas, you don't like cornbread, you don't like neck bones, you don't like pig feet, you don't like pig ears? No, I don't. I don't like any of that. I don't. So just like Charles just kind of nicked you for being white because of what you like, people call me white because of what I don't like. So we can't win. We're both white.
We can't win, man.
We're both white, bro.
Darrell, that's That's the episode 15. So head over to justthinking.me/015. That's a good one.
Justthinking.me/015. That's episode 15. Man, we were still in diapers, bro. We were still in
Right.
We were still in
right.
podcast. We were still in podcast huggies.
Yeah, no, no doubt.
I'm not making an image quote with that on it, okay?
Yes, you are, because yes, you are, April. I mean, Rachel, because here, hold on. You're gonna make a quote about that one, Rachel, because what did Verge just say? He said he gave examples of quote image quotes that you made of him, of something that he said that people were like, wait a minute, what do you mean about that? This is a perfect example of a quote where you need to image it.
Perfect example. Yeah,
okay, Joe, it's on you.
All right, thanks. I'll have to try to make that work.
Yeah.
Put that in the folder for me to approve. We'll see how long it hangs out
Okay.
there.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Oh my
That's
God.
awesome.
Okay. All right. So let me take a stab at that same question I just asked Verge. One thing
Yeah, what do you got, bro?
about me that listeners may not know. Well, I think most people probably know by now that I'm a big Toto fan, right? I'm a big, huge Toto fan.
Yeah.
We know.
Everybody knows that.
Huge Toto. Everybody knows that, right? Yeah. So, but I would just say I'm a huge fan of classic films. I'm a huge fan of classic black and white films. I mean, films that, when I say classic, I mean films from the 20s, the silent movie era. Movies from the 20s into the 50s. I'm really a classic films fan. I love black and white films. Matter of fact, as we record this episode on Sunday, July 26th, news broke this morning here in the States that the actress Olivia de Havilland, who is most well known for her role in the film Gone with the Wind, died yesterday, on Saturday, 104 years old. Olivia de Havilland passed away. So she was Scarlett's sister in Gone with the Wind. Has Gone with the Wind been banned, by the way,
Yes.
in this whole woke wave? But
Yes.
Gone with the Wind's been banned.
Yes.
It's gone.
So Gone with the Wind's been banned. I understand the efforts are underway to ban To Kill a Mockingbird. That's going to be next. So incredible. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of classic films, classic black and white films. I would probably have to say my favorite classic black and white film is Goodbye, Mr. Chips from 1939. I would argue that 1939 is the greatest year in movie history. The greatest year in movie history. That year, matter of fact, let me bore you guys with this if you're not bored already. Let me bore you guys with this. So I can do this because it's my podcast. I can bore you guys. 1939, a bit of trivia. So 1939 is the year that the film Gone with the Wind was released. Okay. Released it, the debut was in Atlanta, my hometown. And Clark Gable played the role, right, of Rhett Butler. But Clark Gable, as successful as that film was, he did not win Best Actor Oscar that year. The guy who played the lead role in Goodbye, Mr. Chips won the Best Actor Oscar that year. So, but anyway, it doesn't mean anything to you guys. Everybody's here. We're doing video, guys. As we record, we're not recording the video, but we're doing video as well. I can see everybody just shaking their heads like, Darrell, move on. Okay. I'm moving on. Verge. So we talked a little bit earlier, a couple of minutes ago, about some of the challenges that you and I encounter when we're trying to prepare for an episode of the Just Thinking podcast, man. I know one of the challenges for you, bro, has got to be that you have no idea in advance how many pages of notes you're going to get from me. So can you share with our listeners, can you describe with our listeners, man, try to paint them some sort of visual picture of what it's like for you to get an email from me with the subject line, here are my JT notes.
Well, there's a lot I could say about that. Like, if you ever see the emoji with the smiley face with the top of the head blown off, that would be that would be indicative. And here's the crazy part about it. it would be one thing if like I got 20 pages, like 48 to 72 hours in advance with no additional changes. But usually it'll include 2 or 3 additional changes that'll get sent to me as add. Oh, brother, I was going back through it. I meant to add this.
Yeah,
Or,
so
I'm
don't
gonna
ever
add this
you
additional quote.
don't ever get comfortable until you get the 3rd email.
Right.
Then
right.
you know I'm good.
Right. Right. Then I know. Then I. So I usually have about 48 hours, 72 hours. And here's kind of the and this may be a little bit more the recipe that's kind of behind the scenes that people don't know, and maybe they want to know it, maybe they don't. I usually shoot for a 60-40 or sometimes a 70-30 kind of conversation with Darrell on the Just Thinking podcast. If you're starting your own podcast and there's kind of a co-host situation, you have a lead host, you have the co-host, and usually your lead host is going to be speaking more. And so recognizing that for the most part, it depends upon what the subject matter is and kind of where I feel I need to interject. I'm usually shooting for a 70-30 ratio. So Darrell, you're going to hear Darrell about 70% of the time, me about 30% of the time. Every once in a while, I get really excited about a topic and I'll shoot for kind of a 60-40 mix. That's kind of what I'm shooting for. So whenever he sends me his notes, I know that I'm aiming around, anywhere between 30 and 40% of my voice being in that mix. Darrell is incredibly and ridiculously gracious. He's never demanded that. This is probably the first time he's hearing me even say that's kind of how I'm looking at things and kind of wiring things. So there's never a demand on me, hey, stop talking so much or anything like that. But that's just kind of how I've kind of adjusted it.
Hey, Virgil, stop talking so much, man.
Yes.
Right on cue.
Right on cue, right? And so that's kind of what we do. And but I'll get the notes. My head's usually exploding and trying to follow his flow of thought to make sure that I'm interjecting in a manner that amplifies either points he's making or brings in another perspective on a specific line of reasoning. So that's kind of what I do.
Yeah, well, thank you, man. Talking about being gracious, Verge, man, you're incredibly gracious to me, bro. Especially enduring, 2 and 3 waves of notes from me, because oftentimes, I think I'm done, and then I'll reread my notes to try to get more familiar with them. It may sound weird to say this, but as you're working your thesis out, and you're writing down your logic, you're citing scripture verses, you're citing other sources. What you're doing right now, what you're doing at that stage is you're just putting together a puzzle. You're trying to put together a puzzle. That is I think that's a perfect analogy of how I can picture it. You're trying to put together a puzzle. Okay. And as you're putting the pieces together, you're not necessarily thinking about what the end picture is going to look like, because you're working to put it together piece by piece by piece. And as I work through my notes, I'm trying to fit one piece up against another piece, and I go to the next piece and try to put that in. So sometimes when I think I'm done, I've got the whole puzzle put together, I'll look back at it and I'll say, well, no, I think it's the right piece, but I think I could add a little more here or clarify something there. So I'm very explicit when I have to send multiple emails to Verge. I'll let them know, hey, this is revision number 2, this is revision number 3, and I'll highlight in my notes where the changes are. So he doesn't have to look through all 20 something pages. He can just go to what page number it is and look for that highlighted color, and he'll know that that's what I've added, or that's what I've changed, or that's what I've removed, or something of that nature. So yeah, thanks for being gracious and patient with me as well. We're getting close to wrapping up this episode, but I thought it'd be perfect to just throw it around the room, starting with Dawain as our executive producer and as the brain trust rather of the Just Thinking podcast. This seriously, this was his idea to launch this platform. So Dawain, let's talk a little bit about the future. What do you think the future holds for the Just Thinking podcast? What would you like to see ideally happen with? What would you like to see God do with this platform?
Honestly, Darrell, man, my vision coming into 2020 was to take what you guys are already doing and amplify. Bringing on Charles, bringing on Rachel, bringing on Joe. Those are all steps to put us in a place to amplify the voice. So moving forward in the future, I mean, for us, the Bible is going to stay the same. The content is going to stay the same. We're going to continue to do that same biblical trek. But for me and the support group, we're going to continue to grow, to advance, to learn different mediums, try to make sure we put this truth in the hands of everybody out there, man. So we're looking at additional mediums. We're looking at additional platforms, making sure that we are cultivating and creating really quality material, because you guys provide the quality content. We want to make sure that we can produce it, transfer, whether it's the audio, whether it's a visual, whether it's video, whatever we're putting out there. We're going to continue to work to improve, to make sure that we give that quality going forward. So that's the vision in a nutshell. I don't have like a point that I'm looking for, or a certain place, or say that we're going to do this next year. That's not the way I think. The way I think is we're going to continue to do what we do and just grow and get better as we do it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying all that, Dawain. And I want to give another virtual bow to Charles, Rachel, Joe, Dawain, because what you guys doing so well, what you do allows Virgil and me to focus on the content. And that's what Virgil, that's the lane that Virgil is. So if I want to talk about what I like to see in the future, I would like to see Virgil and I just continue to be able to stay in this content lane. Having Charles, having Rachel, having Joe, having you, Dawain, as the executive producer, frees Virgil and me from having to worry about any of that. That's why we can focus on what we do well. That's preparing the content for every episode and focusing only on that. So I just want to thank all you guys again for what you're doing. I want to thank our listeners as well, as we prepare to close out this which I hope was for our listeners a lot of fun. I know it was a lot of fun for me getting you guys on, and I especially appreciate being able to introduce our support team to everyone: Charles, Rachel, Joe, Z, Dawain. Folks have heard from Dawain before, but Charles, Rachel, and Joe, I wanted to get you guys out in front of our audience as well. So let me throw it to you three guys: Charles, Rachel, Dawain. If we could go in that order, thoughts on where you'd like to see God take this platform in the future.
Once again, like I said, the content is what brought us all to Just Thinking. It is sound scriptural teaching. Is sufficient. I mean, to see some of the comments and feedbacks from those that are saying, especially after the George Floyd in the gospel episode, and people are saying, I'm seeing people that I've respected for years cave to a false a biblical understanding. So to me, it's just making sure that we serve in a capacity to where you and Virgil can rightly share God's word. The level of growth, let God's will be done and what he would see fit to do. But ultimately, sound biblical teaching is what we all need. And like I said, just to see all the feedback from folks coming in saying how much the platform has richly blessed them, to me, that is, just all, it makes it all worthwhile. So, but that's it. I mean, just happy to see the content continue to spread and reach those, especially as we see these false ideologies come up more and more.
Awesome,
Yeah.
Charles. Thank you, bro. Thank you. Rachel, what you got?
I would just dovetail with that. I mean, my goal has always been to just support you guys, because I really do see it as a ministry that is clearly focused on challenging believers to have their minds renewed and to think biblically. And I appreciate that there is a scholarly approach to biblical fidelity. I mean, that's what I care about. And I think that we have seen a lot of growth because God's people care about that. They care about biblical fidelity. They want to make sure that their minds are grounded in God's word, and they want it to be done in a way that is in line with just right thinking or just thinking. But yeah, no. So I love you guys.
Just thinking right.
I know, right? Yeah, just thinking right. So yeah, I'm happy to help in any way I can, and it's been amazing to kind of watch how Charles and Dawain make all this happen, and the stuff Joe's just able to create. Like, I have been so privileged to see it, and I've really enjoyed the whole experience. Probably more than you guys have enjoyed me enjoying the experience.
Cool your jets, Rachel. Okay, Joe. You throw it over to Joe and then the verse to close us out.
Yeah, I think I just want to echo something that Dawain said earlier. Just the hard work. I appreciate and respect all the hard work that's been put into the show thus far. Glad to be a small part of it and help wherever I can. I think it's doing great work. And the content, everything is just fantastic. So let this be a megaphone for those who want to become more skillful students of the Bible, because it's God's cadence and it's not our cadence.
It's good.
I love that, Joe. It's God's cadence. It's not our cadence. Virgil, why don't you close us out, bro? Oh, Dawain, go ahead. Oh, no. Was that Charles?
I was just going to say our core verse for the platform. Yeah. 1 Corinthians 10:31. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let me ask Verge, because he's always complaining about he can't get his elect standard version in. So let me go ahead and ask Verge if he wants to go ahead and quote 1 Corinthians 10:31 from your elect standard version. Go ahead.
Let me pull it.
Y'all
caught me off guard.
You don't even have it ready. So man, let me read from the Arminian standard.
No, hey, easy, Breezy. I got it. I got it. I just want to make sure I'm quoting it right from the elect standard. So it's with a comma. So with a comma, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God.
Yes. Yep, that verse pretty much summarizes our marching orders, right? Whatever we do, we try to do on the Just Thinking podcast to the glory of God. So, Dawain, anything you want to add, man, before I hand it over to Verse to close us out?
No, man, I'm actually good. I really enjoyed this. I know the listeners will enjoy just behind the scenes, and definitely able to shout out, Rachel, Charles, and Joe, because a lot of people know about me. I actually was on here before, but to get them guys up front, I'm very happy about that, man, and just excited, man, of seeing this vision go as far as it's gone. This was just an idea amongst brothers, and now look what God has done. So that's all I want to say. V, you go ahead and close this out, brother.
And V, before you begin, if you can just remind our listeners, man, what the next episode topic is, my friend.
Yeah. We're dealing with the issue of Black Lives Matter, and we're gonna really kind of exegete their philosophy, their ideology, their worldview, and really examine it against the backdrop and lens of a biblical worldview, and make some critical comparisons. I know Darrell's got a specific thesis that he's going to take, and we're gonna unpack that. I think he's got, like you said, 10 pages of that done. There's no telling what that will look like by the time I get it, but he and I've had conversations, and so I'm really prepared for whatever he might throw, and we'll mix it up, and it'll be as it always is on Just Thinking. So I want to encourage you to be ready for that episode. Help us to push that forward and share that with others. I want to take a moment as well, Darrell, and I know you do as well, because, man, behind the scenes, you mentioned the behind the scenes cast that is here, that is Rachel, Charles, and Joe, and of course everybody knows Dawain, but there are some other folks who are behind the scenes, and that is those people who have decided that they wanted to contribute financially to Just Thinking, and to the ministry, and to what we have going on. We often ask for prayer support, and you and I, Darrell, see in the social media space, in inboxes and the like, where folks get in touch with us and let us know that they're praying for us and for our families and for the ministry and for episodes, and that blesses us tremendously. In addition to that, what people don't often see and I know our team does, is that behind the scenes there are folks who are actually donating their financial resources to Just Thinking. And so I just want to take a moment to say thank you so much to those who've offered a one-time gift of $1, to those who've given us thousands of dollars, for the one time, for the recurring gift of $10, to the recurring gift of $150 a month. I mean, people have, and again, this has been incredible to me. I've been jaw dropped by it, because it's not like every episode, Darrell, you and I get on and try to tell people, hey, be sure and donate, We've not done
we don't do
much,
that.
if any of that at all. And people have come on to the Just Thinking website at justthinking.me, found our page, and out of their own volition just have said, you know what, I believe in what you guys are doing. I believe in what you guys stand for, and I want to partner with you. And so I just want to stop at this point, and for those who've made it this far in this episode, and just say thank you. We there's not a person who has given, whose message we've not seen, whose name we've not read, who from $1 all the way to however much they would give. We've seen every single donation. We've read every single message. We've looked at every single name and have been blessed by it. And I know for Dal and I, we've definitely prayed for those who've partnered with us and will continue to do so. And I just want to take just that moment just to say thank you. I'm blown away. Darrell, anything with regard to that, man, that you want to add?
I think you put it perfectly, Virg. I mean, when you look at the fact that, when you and I, by God's grace, we wake up on a Sunday morning that we have scheduled to record an episode, that's our focus, bro, is to get the episode done, to glorify God and what we're going to record and whatever that hour and a half 2-hour window is. And like you said earlier, when we produce and release an episode, we have no idea who God has in mind to listen to the episode. We don't know who's listening. We don't know where it's going. We know we have listeners around the globe. Okay, we know that. But from the standpoint of where our focus is, we're just so focused on the content. So when the content goes out and we get testimonials in response via emails, people leave us reviews on Apple iTunes, they send us comments via the website. And you weren't exaggerating there. We literally, everyone on the team literally gets alerted whenever we get a comment, whenever we get a donation. Everyone on the team sees it. Okay. And we're just I can't put it any differently, Virgil. We're just absolutely blown away that someone would want to come alongside us and invest in us financially. Because Virgil mentioned it, we never solicit donations in any of our episodes. We don't do that. Why? Not that we can't, but we're not thinking about that. we're not thinking about that. We're thinking about the content. We're thinking about rightly dividing the word of truth for however long that episode is. That's where our focus is. But when we're notified that folks want to come alongside us financially and invest in us, it's just incredible. I have no words. I'm absolutely speechless that folks find the Just Thinking ministry worthy enough to invest in. So let me just echo my co-host words by saying thank you very much. Thank you so much. We can't say thank you enough. Know that you're always in our prayers, because we know, because you told us you're praying for us. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, man, with that, I think we've covered the ground well. Great to have Charles, Rachel, Joe, Z with us. Of course, the maestro himself, executive producer for Just Thinking, Dawain Atkinson. Glad to have him. From Darrell and I, we want to thank you guys for tuning in and ask you to join us next time for another edition of the Just Thinking Podcast.
The Just Thinking Podcast, hosted by Darrell Harrison and Virgil Walker, is a Christ-centered, gospel-focused, and theologically challenging program that boldly and unapologetically addresses social, political, and cultural issues from a biblical worldview. With an international listenership that stretches from the United States and Canada to Romania, Nicaragua, and Mongolia, The Just Thinking podcast breaks through all ethnic, geographic, social, and cultural barriers to bring the objective truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ to the issues confronting his church and his people. Subscribe to the Just Thinking podcast using the podcast app on your Apple or Android smart device, or you can listen online at thebarpodcast.com/JT.